The Buccaneers look to save their season while the Falcons look to finish what the Saints started. That and more on a crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Falcons and Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into a crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Falcons and Locked On Bucs, your daily podcasts covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I am James Yarcho, the host of Locked On Bucs. I am joined by Aaron Freeman, the host of Locked On Falcons, because we have quite the Thursday night showdown to discuss. Maybe not for the right reasons, but it's still going to be interesting to discuss it nonetheless. This crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Aaron, we are going to talk about some of these key matchups that we have. I have my eyes firmly on Kirk Cousins when we get to that. And then, of course, we're going to discuss what these teams have to do to get a win at Raymond James Stadium. But this season is not going the way that either of us thought it was going to go when we did this back in week 1. Like that's just we thought this game could decide who wins the division. And in a way it could, but it not for the Falcons to win the division, just for the Bucs not to. What is the biggest storyline here for the Falcons coming into a Thursday night game for a season that has been underwhelming, to say the least?
Well, James, you nailed it in the sense that the Falcons have an opportunity to play spoiler and even though they're not in the mix to win the division, they have the potential to decide the fate of this division if they can knock off the Bucs and clear a path for the Carolina Panthers of all teams to come for the throne. Who would have bet that the Carolina Panthers would be the team that could potentially dethrone the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in their division run these last couple of years? And so that's the sort of immediate story for this specific game. If the Falcons can play spoilers, in terms of the bigger picture for the Atlanta Falcons and the rest of their season and the future beyond the season, this is a golden opportunity for this Raheem Morris-led coaching staff to show why they should retain their jobs. They're on the hot seat. They're potentially on the outs. We've been operating here on Locked On Falcons these last couple of days with the sort of assumption that they will be fired at the end of the season, and they need a big win against a team that they've had a lot of success against these last 2 years in order to have a chance to keep their job. But going into last week's game against the Seahawks, one of the top teams in the NFC, the real selling point for this coaching staff and this regime for ownership to retain him is to say, hey, yes, the season has not gone the way that we want it to go, but we still have the ability to knock off some of the better teams in the NFC. They weren't able to do that against the Seattle Seahawks after a hard-fought first half, but then it all fell apart for them in the second half. They need to do that against the Bucs. They have a game in a couple of weeks against the LA Rams. So these are really golden opportunities for this coaching staff. If they want to have any chance of saving their jobs, they have to come away with some wins in these final 2 tough matchups against the Bucs and then the Rams later this season.
Yeah, a lot of parallels between the two teams. Now, I will say real quick, Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints, he and I, before our crossover last week, we're once again patting ourselves on the back because on our divisional preview, he and I picked the Panthers to finish second. We both thought that they could be a really solid football team. They might end up coming in first. And yeah, the Falcons can play a huge role in that. And look, the Falcons, it's so hard to look from the outside in at the Falcons because they have a ton of talent. That they're loaded at a lot of these positions. And I realize Drake London isn't playing in this particular game. That's not going to matter. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But you have some incredibly talented players. I had mentioned Xavier Watts as being one of my favorite prospects in the draft. He has been absolutely outstanding in Atlanta. So I said it was underwhelming because it feels like it has been. It feels like they're not playing up to the level that they're capable of, which is exactly what leads into my biggest storyline for the Buccaneers, because there are a lot of parallels here. Todd Bowles is coaching for his job. Like, plain and simple. You can't start 5-1 and then end up at this stage at 7-6, barely clinging on to the division lead with 3 of your final 4 games being against divisional opponents. Now, he can't save his job strictly based on the result of Thursday Night Football, but he can lose it based on the result of Thursday Night Football. If you lose back-to-back weeks to the New Orleans Saints and the Atlanta Falcons at home, you're not winning your next 3 games. You're not winning you're not winning 2 games against the Panthers. You're not beating the Dolphins. That is a full-blown, the engines of the plane have exploded and you're going in for a crash. That is how this will wrap up. So this is an opportunity now for Bowles and the Buccaneers to get back on the right track and start to build towards this final month of the season. Because if Atlanta comes in and beats the Buccaneers, it's game over. I don't see how this team responds, given the way that they've played, given the injuries that they face, given the way that they're being coached. I don't see how they pull out of it, losing yet another game after this fight.
Yeah, we'll see if the Falcons can get their typical Tampa Bay magic. They've had a lot of success against this Bucs team, but it did feel like the Bucs kind of got the monkey off their back in that week 1 game going into Atlanta and winning that game and closing out that game. And, it seems like all these games come down to overtime, the final possession, who has the ball last. And it probably feels like that is going to be the case again on Thursday night. But you always know with these Thursday night games, they are always a little wonky, where there's a potential possibility where one team just does not handle the short week well and just comes out completely flat for this football team. And we'll see if that, winds up being either one of these teams. As you said, this could be potentially, the death knell for that coaching staff.
Yeah, and all bets are off with the divisional game, but I will say at least they're not going to be dealing with the same conditions that the Bucs and Saints did. There's not going to be the rain. It's going to be a really nice night for football. And you and I were talking before we started. We're like, the best part of this game is going to be the aesthetics. You're going to have the creamsicle jerseys for the Bucs. You're going to have the red helmets for the Falcons. I personally cannot wait to see how Ryan Fitzpatrick goes all in on this 70s theme game. But, this is a game that can really go a long way in determining the fates of 2 different coaching staffs. We could be talking about both of these teams having new head coaches after the season, but I think Raheem Morris, for as much as Falcons fans are upset and disappointed, I think you're 100% right. They win this game. They upset the Rams. You could be talking about a guy that potentially saves his job and says, look, let me get Michael Penix back. Let me get, some of these pieces worked out. It's a process. I've only been here a couple of years. He might be able to buy one more. On the flip side for Todd Bowles, if they lose this, to me, it's over. If they win, it's a step in the right direction, but nothing is guaranteed for him or the rest of this staff.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see with Todd Bowles, because it's tough, from the outside looking in. You talk about that, where it's like the Bucs have won the division, 3-4 years in a row, and it's like the possible one time that they slip up, does it wind up costing Todd Bowles his job? But I think, listening to Locked On Bucs these last couple of days, where it's just like a lot of the issues for this current Bucs team is their defense, and that's really the area of control for Todd Bowles. And if the defense is slipping, then you're like, what exactly is Todd Bowles bringing to the table at this point in time? Unfortunately for Raheem Morris, the defensive side of the ball is the strength of the Falcons. But it's really been a disappointing offense for the Falcons that have really kind of tanked their season with some of the quarterback play. But we don't have to worry about that, because Kirk Cousins and Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that means we're going to see elite quarterback play from the Atlanta Falcons quarterback for at least one time this season.
It is Kirk Sember. And, I mentioned just a little bit ago that Drake London won't play in this game. Well, coming up in these key matchups, I'm going to tell you exactly why that doesn't matter. That is coming up on today's Crossover Thursday episodes of Locked On Falcons and Locked On Bucs. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. The holiday season is one of the best times for sports. Bowl games, big basketball matchups, playoff pushes. It's all happening at once. And while we're all making choices every day, one of the most fun places to make the right call is Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest way to get in on daily fantasy. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stat projections, lock in your lineup, and you're in the game. It's simple, fast, and available in 45 states. Creating a lineup takes less than a minute, and the app makes the whole process smooth and intuitive. And the new Stacks feature lets you choose the same player up to 3 times in one lineup, like more on a quarterback's passing yards, touchdowns, and rushing yards. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Thank you again for making Locked On Falcons and Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you are a true diehard Bucs or Falcons fan, the Everyday All Access tier is built for you. You get one-on-one text access with us, all access episodes, an exclusive newsletter, and a 50% discount at the Locked On merch store. Head to Locked On Bucs or lockedonfalcons.supercast.com to join the Everydayer Club and unlock all access. You can also find the link in the show notes. Aaron, there are going to be some matchups that decide this game between these two teams, and neither are playing with a full deck. It's been that way for most of the season, but when you take a look at the Falcons side of this, what is the first matchup that really jumps out to you and says, you know what, this is exactly how the Falcons are really going to help play spoiler?
Well, the same matchups are always the issue between these two teams, right? You look at, Vita Vea has always been a big problem for the Falcons. Mike Evans has always been a big problem for the Falcons. I think really the thing that's going to help the Falcons this week is they won't have Drake London. Kyle Pitts is dealing with a knee injury, so he's going to be questionable for the game. And Kyle Pitts is typically the guy that goes off against the Buccaneers. And so if Kyle Pitts is limited and Drake London's out of the lineup, you do wonder a little bit who's going to really help Kirk Cousins. And Darnell Mooney basically becomes that guy we've been saying on Locked On Falcons for 3 months now. Maybe this is the week that Darnell Mooney breaks out, and he's basically had one good game against the New Orleans Saints, and every other week it's been a disappointment. But we're going to do it one more time, one more week, where this is maybe the week where Darnell Mooney has his breakout game, because they're going to need it from him this particular week. But, for me, the biggest concern going into this game is the matchup on the defensive side of the ball, where you have Mike Evans potentially returning for this game. And it's not because I'm too worried about what Mike Evans is going to do coming off the injuries. AJ Terrell was able to keep him mostly in check in that first game, but it's just basically his presence on the field, I think, can kind of function as a decoy where you force the Falcons to say, okay, well, we got to put our best corner, AJ Terrell, against Mike Evans, because he's the only guy that has a chance against him. And that frees up Emeka Egbuka and Chris Godwin to just feast on the Falcons CB2 and CB3 and Mike Hughes and D. Alford. And we saw Egbuka have a lot of success in week 1 against Mike Hughes. We didn't get to see Chris Godwin in that matchup. We also didn't get to see Tristan Wirfs in that matchup. And so these are some players that can have the potential to affect this particular game that weren't able to do so last time.
I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things that I said earlier this week was if I'm the Bucs, even if Mike Evans is on a snap count, even if they're just going to slowly work him in, if I am Josh Grizzard, I am opening the first possession with 2 quick outs to Mike Evans. And I say quick outs so that he doesn't have to get tackled. It's a quick sideline route, get the ball in his hands, let him get out of bounds, pick up a handful of yards, and get a quick first down. If I do that, now the Falcons have to know and have to respect that he is going to be a factor in this game, and it's going to open things up for Egbuka and Godwin, because until he gets that first catch, they can sit back and they can say, you know what? Prove to me that you're even going to throw him the ball and he's not just a decoy. So I'm glad you brought that up. And Egbuka needs a get-right game. He really does. He has been struggling so bad. He is on pace since the bye week. He's on pace for 153 targets over the course of a 17-game season with only 60 receptions. Things have fallen apart for a very promising rookie who, over the course of his career, averages 2 touchdowns a game against the Falcons. So hopefully this is the magic recipe to get him back on track. But Aaron, the first thing that I'm looking to is Todd Bowles versus Kirk Cousins. So I did a little dive, and I discovered that Kirk Cousins has over 1,350 yards and has completed 73% of his passes against Todd Bowles since 2019. And the reason I picked 2019 is because that's when Todd Bowles joined the Buccaneers. He's got 11 touchdowns to just 2 interceptions. Those are the most touchdowns that he has and the most yards that he has against any defensive coordinator over that span. On average, that's over 300 yards and almost 3 touchdowns a game. So it doesn't matter to me that Drake London is out. Darnell Mooney has had big games against this Buccaneers team. Kadarius Hodge has made big plays against this team, and Kyle Pitts always has his best game against this defense. Plus, you still have Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier out of the backfield who can both run up and down the field, and they're both threats in the passing game, which is something the Buccaneers can't stop. They cannot stop running backs in the passing game. We saw that on the opening drive for the Falcons in week 1 when Bijan took one for 50 yards because Servassier Dennis took a terrible angle and missed the tackle. So to me, as much as I want Drake London in my fantasy lineup in this matchup, his absence is not going to be a reason that we look back and say, oh, well, the Falcons would have won if they had Drake London. No, the Falcons passing attack should be just fine because Kirk Cousins owns Todd Bowles' defense.
Yeah, we will see if we get that version of the Falcons. This has been the issue, James, where it's just like, oh, well, the top Falcons should be able to do this, and then they don't wind up doing the thing that they should be able to do. That's one of the reasons why they're disappointing and why coaches might get fired at the end of the season. The other thing I want to see this team do that they haven't typically done, particularly with Tristan Wirfs in the lineup, is get after Baker Mayfield, right? Without Tristan Wirfs, the Falcons were only able to sack Baker Mayfield one time in that week 1 game. They were able to get a lot of pressure in that game, but they have to get Baker Mayfield on the ground because as we saw in that game, if you allow Baker room to throw, he's going to be able to hit some of those throws on the back end. I know he's dealing with an injury and he hasn't been playing as well as late as he was at the beginning of the season, but certainly we know that Baker Mayfield, similar to Kirk Cousins, is more than capable of carving up this Falcons defense. And so I want to see this Falcons pass rush that has come alive this season get after Baker Mayfield and put him on the ground instead of one time. They need to do it like 4 or 5 times. And if they can do that, I think they'll win this football game.
And my key for the Bucs offense is to avoid that entirely by running the football. And you're right, Baker is not healthy. He's not playing good football. So why wouldn't you lean on the most explosive guy on the roster to control the tempo and the clock and face the weaker portion of this Atlanta defense? And I'm talking about Bucky Irving. He has been more than solid since returning from injury. He's going to have to carry the load for an offense that seems to have really lost their way. Now, they did just lose Ben Bredesen for the rest of the regular season. He was placed on IR. That does not help matters. But the Falcons' run defense has been less than impressive. They're 24th in yards allowed and yards per carry. They're 24th in rushing first downs allowed, and they're 23rd in third down rush conversion rate. So you can run the ball against this defense. You need Bucky to be the guy to indirectly protect Baker from not just the Falcons pass rush, but also himself. And I'm not saying Baker should only throw the ball 10 times, but when the run game is going, that's when this Bucs offense is at its best. You have Bucky, you have Rashad, you have Sean Tucker, you have 3 capable running backs that can get the job done. And the best way to protect this Todd Bowles-led Bucs defense is by keeping Kirk Cousins on the sideline for as much as possible. In order to do that, you've got to run the ball and you've got to do it effectively.
Now, 6 weeks ago, James, I would have said, oh, the Bucs would be able to do whatever they wanted to do on the ground. But over the last 4 weeks, the Falcons' run defense has tightened up, and it's actually been functional. It's actually been not terrible where it was for most of this season, all because of Kentavious Street, of all people. Once he got into the lineup, Kentavious Street seemingly single-handedly has solved the Falcons' run defensive problems over the last 4 games, and they're actually performing at an above-average clip in terms of slowing down the running team. So that gives me some optimism that the Bucs won't just simply be able to hand the ball off to their running backs and just carve them up as they are capable of doing. And then you deal with those offensive line injuries. That does also give me a little bit more optimism now that you're down to both of your backup guards at this point in the season, with Graham Barton, the center, only being the only of the three interior guys that is healthy at this stage in the season. So that gives me a little bit of optimism that the Falcons will be able to slow down this Bucs run game. And again, it's going to be kind of a back and forth sort of ball game where like this strength and this weakness of this team are kind of going to cancel each other out. And I do kind of feel like it's going to boil down to who has the ball last. That will be the team that winds up winning this game.
Well, it seems like the arrow is pointing in the Falcons' direction. We talk about what these teams need to do to get a win, and we make our predictions. That's coming up next on a Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Falcons and Locked On Bucs. Car shopping should feel exciting, not confusing. And with Car Gurus, you get the confidence you deserve. They cut through all the noise so you can actually see the best deals on the cars that you want. Because when it comes to a big purchase, you deserve the best deal. And Car Gurus makes the whole process simple by giving you real information, real deal ratings, and more listings than anyone else, so you can shop the way you want. You'll love being able to filter by everything, mileage, trim, features, so you're only seeing cars that actually fit what you need, and their price drop alerts are a lifesaver. You get notified the second a car you're watching becomes a better deal. That's exactly how I got my new car just last year. Car Gurus connects you with trusted dealerships for transparent and hassle-free buying process. With over 4 million listings, the most of any major online automotive marketplace, you'll always find the best deal. So shop the way you want with the tools, data, and unbiased deal ratings that make it easy. Buy or sell your next car today at cargurus.com. That's CARGURUS.com, cargurus.com. Guys, it's 2025, almost 2026, and those days of waiting for something to become a full-blown emergency before you see a doctor, they're over. No more walking it off for 6 months. No more pretending that weird shoulder stiffness is just sleeping wrong. It's time to take your health seriously, and ZocDoc makes it easier than ever, because staying healthy is more than hitting the gym or eating right. It's about actually getting things checked out when something feels off. Using ZocDoc makes scheduling easier. Search for in-network doctors and book in the right app. You get real appointment times listed, including same-day visits, so there's no more back-and-forth phone calls or waiting weeks to be seen. So stop putting off your doctor's appointments and get the care you need. Go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL, ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. Wrapping things up here on a Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Falcons and Locked On Bucs. And Aaron, they're under the bright lights on Thursday Night Football for the second year in a row. It's a change in venue, but it's the same teams. It's the same night. And it's aesthetically pleasing. Football might be a little questionable. What do the Falcons need to do to win this game?
Well, I know the Locked On Falcons listeners are tired of me saying the same thing when we get to like the keys to victory on these crossover Thursdays. But I sit here and I say, the Falcons, I say, hey, do these things and you'll win the game. And then the Falcons don't do the things and they lose the game. And so I sit here and I go, like, if it ain't broke, I mean, the team is broke, but at least as far as keys to victory go, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so I say, instead of saying a fast start, we'll change the wordage and say they need to come out swinging. Right. We need to see Kirk Cousins show up in that first quarter, get this Falcons offense off to a fast start. This team has overwhelmingly been a front runner this season. When they start off strong offensively, they typically play better. Obviously, it's like, of course, yeah, if you score points early in the game, that probably means you're going to score more points. But like, that's been true of the Falcons. They have been one of the worst third quarter teams in the NFL. And they need to basically counteract that by playing really good football in the first quarter of games. Now, one thing that the Falcons might want to do, but Raheem Morris has shown no indication that he's going to do, rather than receiving the football to start the game, they might want to defer to the second half. Maybe that will help them jumpstart their offense in the second half of the game. So I would say that would be a key to victory. But since I don't expect the Falcons to do that, I'm not going to even mention it at this point in time. But if they can get off to a fast start, then maybe they got a shot to be able to, be in a position late in the game to win the game as they could.
Well, at least you know that anytime the Falcons get a kickoff, they're returning it for a minimum of 40 yards because this Bucs kick coverage is absolutely abysmal. Like, might be the worst ever.
I thought the Falcons were the worst over. So it's good. An unstoppable force versus an immovable object, two terrible teams that can't cover kickoffs.
I vote we just get rid of the kickoff for this game. Both teams just start at the 50 every time.
There you go.
Are we in? All right, cool. My keys to victory is basically going to be one overarching key to victory that I don't know. The best way that I can phrase it is the Bucs need to get their heads out of their butts. Like, plain and simple. You are too talented of a football team to be playing this way. And last week against the Saints is a perfect example. If I told you that the Saints were 5 for 11 on third downs, you would think, okay, that's not great, but it's not the worst, until I tell you that all 5 of those third down conversions came in the second half. At one point, they were 5 for 5. They didn't fail on a third down conversion until their next to last possession. Meanwhile, the Bucs offense was 3 for 13. They went 2 for 7 on fourth down. So even when the kick coverage unit wasn't giving up half the field, the offense was. So the Saints had a short field the entire time. The middle of the field was wide open the entire time. This is basic pee-wee football stuff. You wrap up a guy to bring him down, and you cover the middle of the field. Wherever the sticks are, cover it. Servassier Dennis has been terrible in coverage. He's not playing this week. He is out with a hip injury, but he was the best that they had already. So you have Deion Jones coming in, who he's been serviceable, but he's not a starting caliber linebacker. Levante David has lost 2 to 3 steps this season. So this defense is going to be incredibly vulnerable. But they still have a ton of talent. And if you get your head out of your butt, you might be able to make a play or two against Kirk Cousins, who lost his job for a reason. Don't make him look like prime Brady. Make him look like current day Kirk Cousins.
There you go. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that this game, we're looking at the Bucs favored by 4.5 and over under a 44.5. Aaron, where are you? I know we don't get the Friday final preview, so if you're up for it, I'll give a score prediction. But how do you see this game going?
Yeah, it's going to be one of those games where it's going to be like a 27-24 type of ball game. And I feel like because the Falcons special teams has been so bad, I'm going to give the edge to the Bucs, right? Like, why would I pick the Falcons to win a game because they've lost 7 out of the last 8? They should win this game, but I have no confidence. I've been beaten down, James, for the last 2 months, as opposed to you only been beaten down for 1 month. So I'm down bad even further than you are at this point in time with the Falcons. And so I got the Bucs winning this one, a 27-24 type of game. All
right. So Bucs winning, Falcons covering, hitting the over on that score prediction. And look, I don't believe in this team. I don't. I have no reason to at this point in time. Todd Bowles, his defense is a shell of what it's supposed to be. The offense, with all the injuries, they're a shell of what they're supposed to be. And until they go out there and show that they're a competent football team that can put together drives that end in touchdowns, they can get stops when they need it to get off the field, I can't think that they're going to win. And, we said it already. It's fitting that the Bucs are going to be in their creamsicle orange because they look like the 1980s Bucs that, invented losing. That's just how it feels right now. They're a team that even when they're playing really well, they're constantly waiting for something to go wrong. And instead of rallying, they let the whole thing fall apart from then on. So I'm taking the Falcons to win this one. And I think it's going to be a 2-score game. I'm looking at this as like 30-21. Maybe even throw in a defensive score there. Since you don't, I'm guessing you don't think the Falcons can put up 30 offensively. No. I'll throw in a scoop and score. I'll throw in a Xavier Watts pick 6. So that's kind of where I see this going. And I won't pick the Bucs until they show me that they're actually capable of winning a football game.
This is a classic NFC South game where it's like, no, my team is worse than your team. No, my team is worse than your team. This was it's feeling. It's good to be back, James. We're back home where this NFC South division has been for so many years.
We are all the way back. I can't wait to talk to Julian next week on Crossover Thursday. It'll be the first time I've talked to him all year, and it's going to be like, oh, yeah, this game's for first place. You got to love NFC South football. All right, that is going to do it for this episode of Locked On Falcons and Locked On Bucs. Please make sure you're subscribed on YouTube as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you're coming back tomorrow. We will have reactions and recaps to this Thursday night football game. You don't want to miss that. And, of course, you can follow on Twitter. I am at Yarcho_Bucks. Aaron is at it's at Locked On Falcons, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So at Locked On Falcons over there. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons, and whatever it is that the Falcons say. And we want to thank you for tuning into Crossover Thursday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.